My name is Erin Mansour. I live in Charleston, South Carolina. I am a recovered addict. I just celebrated 25 years of sobriety, and I'm also a survivor of many forms of abuse. So I've actually been sexually assaulted more than once by more than one person. That is actually something that I, in my last few years, just recently understood and discovered. So I really didn't know when I even first started advocating for women and men who have been sexually abused that I was actually sexually abused way more than one time. My first incident was when I was 14 years old. I was living in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I would love to just give as much information as I can, because if anybody watching this knows anything about the person who did this to me and can get in touch with me, that would be really great, because I think that that would be incredibly cathartic. I babysat for a woman named Kathleen. Kathleen's brother was in town, Kevin, for the summer visiting her, and he was working at our pool as a swim team coach. From the beginning, seeing him and thinking he was just like so incredibly attractive, instant crush. Early on in the summer, I'll never forget, like he and I, we would talk, we would kind of like buddy and chum around. I was over there one day, I kissed him, and it's crazy because as an adult looking back on these things, you don't realize how much these things impact you. He kissed me back, but he then quickly pushed me away and said, "No, this isn't okay. We can only be friends. You can't kiss me like that." It was because I had tried to French kiss him. I'll never forget just feeling so embarrassed, mortified, rejected. Here I am. This is the first time I've really ever tried to kiss a guy. After that happened, went from going to see him at the house and going to see him at the pool as much as I could to kind of withdrawing. And then we went on a vacation to Myrtle Beach, where I ended up having my first physical experience with a guy. I think I went to second or third base. I developed a serious crush on him. And then we came home from Myrtle Beach. Kevin called me out of nowhere, and I answered the phone, and he said, "Aren't you going to come say goodbye to me? I'm leaving tomorrow." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know." And he said, "Well, you should come say goodbye to me." And so I said, okay. I went downstairs and I told my mom, "Hey, I'm going to go to the pool." When he opened the door and let me in, I could smell on his breath, and I saw that he had his hand. And so I was like, okay. And he's like, "Where have you been?" And I was like, "I've just been busy." Kind of escalated really quickly. He just went in to kiss me, and I was very confused. I didn't understand. We were downstairs and we were kissing a little bit, and then he just pulled his penis out and was like, "You don't want to leave me like that, do you? You don't want to give me blue balls, do you?" I had never seen a male private part, ever, never. I could tell he wasn't going to let me leave. He basically was like, "I want you to suck my d-." I had no idea how to do that, but he basically just kind of pushed my head down and had me start doing that to him. I really honestly feel like a lot of me blacked out as far as what happened, other than it was over. And then I was going upstairs and I was very upset. I was like, "I need to go to the bathroom." And he was like, I'll never forget, because I was getting ready to close the door to the bathroom, and he leaned in to kiss me, and then he stuck his hand down my pants and he started to finger me, but then he put his fist up at me. When he pulled it out, it was covered in blood, which was so traumatizing. What ended up happening was my mom showed up. She showed up at the house and she rang the doorbell. He saw through the glass, and I was so scared. So I remember seeing the blood on his hand, and then I remember going back down to the lower level and going out the back and just running home. And it was just, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I should tell my mom. I didn't know if I should tell anybody. I was very scared, very ashamed, and really in shock, because so much of that had happened to me so quickly. And again, I was very innocent, and I look back on that now and I just remember that was all of my innocence just being ripped from me, basically just the way that he just stuck it, just pulled out of me all at once. It was very soon after that I began to do I became incredibly promiscuous. It was like a light switch. It was just like so fast. I went from being like pretty straight and like good, like really good, to like huffing, smoking, drinking as much as I could get my hands on, just giving boys blowjobs. A few days after it happened, I did tell my mom. I asked her not to tell my dad. She was mortified and in shock. He had left. He was gone. I do know that he was from Connecticut and that Kathleen was also from Connecticut and that he went back to Connecticut. So again, around that age, me being 14, I'd have to do the math on that because I'm 47 now. I'm thinking that that was like early 1990. So if anybody that watches this knows of a person that at the time I was 14, he was 21. So that would mean that he's now close to being 60. Kevin Sennett is his name, from Connecticut. Anybody ever watches this and finds him or knows him, please contact me. Other than talking about it with my mom, I didn't tell anybody. After Kevin did what he did to me and I became very much an addict, we moved and we ended up landing in Mississippi, and it was in Vicksburg that I met Herman. I was 15, he was 26. He was the gym owner. I don't think he really owned the gym, but the gym manager of the gym that I started working out at. I didn't tell him I was 15, but come on, like I have looked back at the pictures and I know that there is one that we sent in of me at 14. I didn't look much different at 15. I sure as hell did not look old enough to be in a relationship with a 26-year-old. Very quickly, Herman and I began a relationship. We were dating and having almost every day. And I won't ever forget him telling me, like, because I ended up telling him I was 15. I initially told him I was 22, but then like really shortly after that, I told him I was 15. And he was like, you can't tell anybody that you're dating me. We have to keep this a secret between you and I. I would see him with other girls at the gym and I just had to pretend like it was no big deal. But then I would be at his house at night and he'd be having sex with me and I'd be in the bed with him and like literally thought I was his girlfriend. And again, I did not really understand that I was being raped and sexually abused. And I don't even know how many times he did that to me until later on in life. Like for a very long time, I felt like what happened with Kevin, because in the beginning, I relentlessly pursued him. And then what happened with Herman, like I just thought, oh, okay, that's like, that was normal. I had a 26-year-old boyfriend, even though I was 15. That was my second assault, but that was not an isolated incident. Kevin only assaulted me once. I don't even know how many times Herman had sex with me. The part that really shakes me to my core is that people that are abused, when they get into these situations, especially because I had already been abused by Kevin and really felt like it was my fault and that I made it happen, I had no clue that what Herman was doing was abusing me. Like I didn't understand that. I didn't realize that until I was like way in like 2 or 3 years ago when I went to therapy and really started to uncover again. So I got pregnant at 17. Actually, my daughter's father, it was a consensual sexual experience, but he treated me awful. 17, pregnant, abused so many times by Herman and by Kevin once. I think I actually got raped, but I'm not positive. I can't remember it completely. This was in Mississippi, separate from Herman. This was a bunch of high school guys, but I'm not positive. I don't know because once the finally started to leave my system, I was like, I'm not touching anything. I started to have really severely debilitating panic attacks and I was using food to comfort myself. And so I ended up gaining 100 pounds during my pregnancy with my daughter. Then as soon as I had her, I came home from the hospital and now not only am I facing being a single teenage mom, I'm also obese. The panic attacks were so severe that I became agoraphobic. I wouldn't leave my home. I didn't leave my home for 6 months. And so I ended up in therapy. And I started my very first time in therapy was at the age of 17 with a really amazing psychologist. I was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder and severe panic attacks. So that began my whole stint with mental health, which at the age of 17, like here I am. I'm obese. I'm a recovered addict. I'm a survivor of sexual abuse, probably got raped. Still to this day, don't know. And I'm a single teenage mom. I went with my dad to transfer to Trident Tech. I started going to Trident Tech, and that summer, so I left my daughter with my mom for a few months, and I was commuting back and forth and began totally partying at the beach because Dylan wasn't there. So I would go and hang out with the local kids and get totally and just have tons of sex with tons of people. I have no idea, honestly, still to this day, how many people I've slept with. I'm very, very, so blessed that I never got an STD, honestly. And that was a big fear of mine, like a huge fear of mine. And so my drinking kind of stayed consistent. And then we moved, my mom and my brothers moved here, and we got a house in Charleston, and I was raising my daughter and getting my bachelor's degree, but still incredibly promiscuous. And on my 22nd birthday, my parents took me out to a restaurant. I had a very, very severe panic attack, and it ended up putting me into the hospital. My parents had to take me to the ER. I thought I was having a heart attack, and I thought I was dying. I'll never forget just thinking, this is it. This is the end. I'm going to die, and my daughter isn't going to have anybody. She's not going to have, because her dad was not in the picture. The doctor walked into the room, and he said to me, "You had an anxiety attack." And he was like, "Do you drink?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Do you smoke?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Do you use caffeine?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "All three of those things are triggers for anxiety attacks. And my best advice to you is to leave here tonight and never do any of that again." At 22, I ended up going into the mental hospital. The hardest part about doing that was leaving Dylan, feeling like such a failure because I didn't understand why I was having to go into this place where crazy people were, why I was having to leave her. As soon as I got in there was a really nice charge nurse, and she came in and she gave me, so it was actually 22 because that's when I got put on. And when she gave me, I'll never forget the feeling of just calm, and I fell asleep. And it was the first time I'd slept in 5 days. When I finally woke up, which probably was I don't even know how long I slept, my parents came to visit me and they brought Dylan. And I'll never forget thinking, this can't be your life. I have to get better for you. I have to be a better mom. I ended up getting diagnosed as a sex addict while I was in outpatient therapy. And I ended up becoming involved with a schizophrenic. Crazy to me. I actually had him over to my house, and I'll never forget, we were in my room kissing. He was talking to himself, and it's not funny, but it's kind of funny, but it's really not funny. But I was like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "Well, the voices, they don't like you." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "They don't like you." And I was like, "Okay, I think you're gonna need to go." Thankfully, I didn't sleep with him. But then I ended up bringing home another person from the mental hospital, and he was manic depressed, and I did have sex with him, which is, can't even, I thought I got better, but had a ways to go. But I did stay in therapy. And after the outpatient therapy, I continued to go to therapy, but I also continued to be promiscuous. And I was engaged numerous times. And then I met Donnie, and Donnie moved in. So I was still living in Charleston neighborhood with my parents. So this went on for about 2 years. I was in college, being promiscuous, in and out of therapy, still having severe panic attacks, still calling 911 quite a bit. In 2018 is when I really began to start to heal, truly heal from everything that I went through. And that was when our marriage really just turned around and became just this beautiful. I ended up starting aggressive trauma therapy. I started in January of 2023, aggressive trauma therapy with the most amazing therapist in the whole entire world, Dr. Mike. If you watch this, thank you. Over this last year and a half, I have really, really began to visit things and talk about things. I've been very open about my story of abuse for a very long time, but what I don't think I understood was how unwell I still was. I was always advocating for other people to get help and to be better and to tell their stories and to just be a survivor, but secretly I was not really better. I was just thinking I was better because I was obsessed with helping other people. I just truly did not understand how unhealed I was until I had some health issues arise. And what I've learned over the last 2 years with Dr. Mike is that these health things that would continuously pop up, the panic attacks, the migraines, the vision, all of that, it was all a manifestation of trauma trying to come out. It was trauma trying to leave my body, and I never got that. And I do now. And so after this last year and a half of really aggressively working through the trauma and going back and seeing myself as a little girl and seeing myself as a 14-year-old and seeing myself as, a younger adult, I've been able to go back, nurture her, write letters to her, tell her she's worthy, tell her that she's going to change more lives than she even knows, and she's just getting started because of everything that she's been through. About 5 weeks ago, Chris and I took our kids on a road trip. The goal was to get to Zion, and as we were going to Zion, which we didn't get to Zion, but that's a totally different story. We ended up having a huge termite infestation. It's okay, we're still going to go to Zion later on this summer. And by the way, the termites are gone, everything is great, and the house has been completely remediated, and we now have a damage bond on our home. So anybody that buys this house will now be protected forever. Just need to say that. But anyway, I knew that our route was going to take us through Chattanooga, and Chattanooga is where the first sexual incident with Kevin happened. And so while we were in Chattanooga, I said to Chris, I think I want to go to my childhood home, the one that I lived in when I was abused. And so we were staying at a hotel, and we actually left the kids because one of them is 18, so it was fine. Like they were good, and they were sleeping and then getting up and getting room service and stuff. But Chris and I went and we drove to, I texted my brother and I asked him for the address, and he's like, I can't believe you don't remember the address. And I'm thinking, if you only knew everything I'd been through, you'd understand why I don't remember the address. So he texted me the address, and we drove to the home that I lived in when I got abused. And I will never forget, because it was just 5 weeks ago, but I won't forget it for the rest of my life, pulling up to the home and thinking that's not the home I lived in. And I actually texted my brother and said, this isn't our home. You gave me the wrong address. And he's like, no, I didn't. And I'm like, it doesn't look the same, because I even remembered it differently. But what I didn't remember differently was the home that I was abused at, because when we drove down the street, I had Chris stop in front of Kathleen's home where Kevin had lived that summer. And I saw myself running out of the house after it had happened, and I just began to sob, and Chris just held me, and I just had to say goodbye. I had to get that closure. It was very cathartic, and it seemed so appropriate that Chris, who had never given up on me and has never given up on me, would be the one to be there holding my hand, because I had not seen that place since the abuse. And I feel like when we left Chattanooga, I really kind of just closed it. It's it's done. My hope for anyone who watches this, who has been sexually abused, is that you will not wait as long as I did to get the help that you need, because life is short and it's precious, and you're worthy of that life, and you deserve it. You deserve to live without the burden and the shame and the guilt and the betrayal and all of the feelings that are attached to it. You deserve to start living now. You don't have to carry it with you. There are so many qualified experts that can help you walk through the trauma and help you to grieve the healthy way, to become strong